The kitchen was alive with noise, the hiss of the grill, the clatter of plates, the steady rhythm of the dishwasher pounding like a drum in the background. Daniel stood at the sink, his back aching as steam rose around him in thick clouds. His hands were red and cracked, stung by the endless waves of hot water and soap. He worked as though the world depended on it, because in his small way, it did. Every plate he scrubbed, every glass he polished, meant another shift complete, another few dollars closer to keeping the lights on at home. Daniel wasn't a man who dreamed of wealth or grandeur. His only dream was simple: to give his little girl, Emma, a life free from the heaviness he carried. She was 8 years old, bright-eyed and curious, with a laugh that made even his darkest days feel lighter. Each night when he returned home exhausted, she would run into his arms, chatter about her school day, and show him the drawings she had made. And each time, he would remind himself, this was why he pushed through. This was why he worked the long hours others wouldn't take. But tonight, exhaustion gnawed at him more fiercely than usual. The restaurant was understaffed, and he had been on his feet since morning. His mind drifted to Emma. Her shoes had holes in them, and she had quietly asked if she could get new ones for the school year. He hadn't answered, just kissed her forehead and promised he would figure it out. He always tried to figure it out. Daniel, a sharp voice cut through the clatter. He froze, turning to see Mr. Harris, the restaurant manager, standing at the edge of the kitchen. His arms were folded, and his expression carried the weight of judgment. "We've had complaints again." Daniel's heart sank. "Complaints," he repeated, his voice almost drowned out by the dishwasher. "Some customers said their glasses weren't spotless. Plates came back with streaks." "This isn't the first time," Harris said flatly, his tone devoid of sympathy. Daniel opened his mouth, then shut it. He wanted to explain, wanted to say that with fewer staff and broken equipment, mistakes happened. But excuses never helped. He knew that from experience. Instead, he swallowed hard, forcing a polite nod. "I'll do better. One more mistake, and you're out," Harris warned, then turned on his heel, leaving Daniel staring at the suds swirling down the drain. The words echoed in his mind like a death sentence. Out. Fired. He imagined walking through the door to Emma, not with dinner in a paper bag like he sometimes managed, but with empty hands and a heart full of defeat. Rent was already overdue by 3 days. The landlord's note still sat on the kitchen table at home, a silent reminder of what was coming if he didn't pay. And Emma's list of school supplies, pencils, notebooks, crayons, remained untouched. His little girl had tried to hide the disappointment when she noticed other kids already had new things, but Daniel had seen it in her eyes. He tightened his grip on the sponge, scrubbing harder, faster, as if sheer effort could keep everything from falling apart. He thought about all the odd jobs he had done over the years: construction, janitorial work, delivery driving. None had lasted. Each time, something had gone wrong, and each time he had started over. Washing dishes wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. It was survival, and survival was all he needed for Emma. His coworkers passed by, some offering a sympathetic glance, others too busy to notice. Daniel was invisible most of the time, the kind of man people overlooked. He didn't mind. He wasn't there for recognition. But tonight, the weight of being unseen pressed heavier on his chest. He thought about how hard he worked, how many hours he poured into this place, and how easily he could be discarded with a single sentence. As the dinner rush picked up, Daniel moved like a machine. Plates stacked high beside him, steam fogged his glasses, and sweat dripped down his temple. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, but he pushed on. When a glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, his heart leapt into his throat. He bent quickly, gathering the shards, praying Harris hadn't seen. His reflection in the broken pieces startled him. Tired eyes, lines carved deep into his face, a man far older than his 34 years. When the pile finally shrank and the kitchen quieted, Daniel leaned against the sink for a moment, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He thought of Emma again, how she always kissed his hand goodnight, no matter how rough and calloused it had become. She didn't care that her father was just a dishwasher. To her, he was a hero. And that thought was the only thing keeping him standing. He whispered under his breath, a prayer no one else could hear. "Please, God, don't let me lose this. She needs me. I'll do anything." Just let me keep this. The words faded into the hum of the kitchen. He straightened, put his head down, and reached for the next dish. One more shift survived, one more night closer to tomorrow. But as Daniel worked through the last of the stack, the fear wouldn't leave him. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath him crumbling inch by inch. All it would take was one more mistake, one more misstep, and everything he had fought for would come crashing down. Still, he kept scrubbing. Because that was all he could do. Because giving up wasn't an option when someone else's smile depended on him. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the worry and the weariness, a flicker of hope remained, fragile, faint, but alive. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat at the small kitchen table, the dim bulb above flickering faintly as if it too was exhausted from holding on. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch with her schoolbook in her lap, her small hand resting on a stuffed bear she'd carried since she was a toddler. Daniel watched her for a long time, memorizing the peaceful rise and fall of her chest. She trusted him with her whole world. The thought made his heart ache. What if he came home tomorrow without a job? How would he look into her eyes and explain that he'd failed her again? By dawn, his nerves were frayed. He got Emma ready for school, tucking her worn shoes onto her feet with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Be good today, pumpkin," he whispered, kissing her forehead. She hugged him tightly, unaware that her father's chest was heavy with fear. At the restaurant, the kitchen buzzed with the usual chaos, but Daniel barely heard it. His mind replayed Harris' words over and over. One more mistake, and you're out. He washed plate after plate, forcing himself to stay sharp, to focus. Every movement felt like it carried the weight of his future. Then, just before the lunch rush, Harris appeared again, his face unreadable. "Daniel, the office, now." The words froze him where he stood. His legs felt like stone as he dried his hands and walked down the narrow hallway. The office door loomed ahead like the entrance to a courtroom. He braced himself for the worst. Inside, Harris wasn't alone. A man in a dark suit sat at the desk, holding a thick envelope. His presence was commanding, calm, and Daniel instantly knew this wasn't just another managerial scolding. Harris' expression was strangely subdued, almost uneasy. "Mr. Carter," the suited man began, his voice steady, professional. "My name is Thomas Reed. I represent the estate of Mr. Anderson." Daniel frowned, confused. "Mr. Anderson, the owner." Reed nodded. "The late Mr. Anderson. He passed away 2 weeks ago." Daniel's stomach twisted. He remembered the old man. He used to come into the restaurant, dressed plainly despite being the billionaire founder of the chain. Most staff had treated him like any other customer, some even dismissively when he lingered too long. But Daniel always greeted him with respect, offering him a warm smile, a glass of water before he asked, and listening to the stories the old man loved to tell about his younger days. To Daniel, he hadn't been the billionaire, he'd just been another human being who looked lonely sometimes. Reed opened the envelope and pulled out several pages. Mr. Anderson left a will. In it, he made very specific instructions. He chose someone unexpected to succeed him. Daniel's heart pounded. He didn't breathe. "Daniel Carter," Reed continued, his eyes steady on him, "you have been named the new chief executive officer of this company." The words didn't make sense at first. Daniel blinked, thinking he had misheard. A dishwasher, CEO. He almost laughed, certain this was some kind of mistake, some cruel joke. But Reed's tone held no hint of humor. The silence in the room was thick, Harris staring as though the world had flipped upside down. I think you've got the wrong person," Daniel stammered, his hands trembling. "I wash dishes. I don't know anything about running a company." Reed's expression softened, though his voice remained professional. "Mr. Anderson was very clear. He wrote that he admired your humility, your work ethic, and most importantly, your kindness. He believed the company had lost its soul, and he wanted someone at the top who understood what it meant to serve, not just to profit. You showed him compassion when no one else did. That was what mattered to him." Daniel felt his throat tighten. His mind raced back to the times Mr. Anderson had sat at a corner booth, telling stories about the hardships of his youth, about how he once worked odd jobs no one respected. Daniel had listened, nodded, even laughed at the old man's jokes. It hadn't cost him anything but time and patience. And now, somehow, it had changed his entire life. Harris finally spoke, his voice dripping with disbelief. This is insane. He's a dishwasher. He doesn't belong in a boardroom. Reed turned to him sharply. Mr. Anderson made his wishes legally binding. This is not open for debate. Daniel's legs felt weak. He sank into the chair, his head spinning. CEO. The word seemed too big, too heavy for him to carry. Yet, as the shock coursed through him, another thought broke through. Emma. His little girl. For the first time, he imagined a future where she wouldn't have to go without, where he could buy her shoes that fit, where she could dream without limits. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring the papers Reed placed before him. That evening, when Daniel picked Emma up from school, she ran into his arms as always. But this time, his embrace was fiercer, his tears unhidden. Daddy, what's wrong? She asked, her small hands on his face. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart, he whispered, voice shaking. Everything's going to be okay now. Better than okay. He didn't know how he would manage being CEO. He didn't have the training or the polish of the men in suits. But he had something they didn't. He knew what it was like to struggle, to scrape by, to feel invisible. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the company needed. As he walked home with Emma's hand in his, Daniel felt the weight of years of hardship lift, replaced by something new, hope. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked, undervalued, or underestimated. The dishwasher had been handed a future no one saw coming. And in that moment, Daniel promised himself he would honor it, not with greed or pride, but with the same kindness that had opened the door in the first place. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of humanity can change everything.